I find myself across the table from a man who once wielded more influence than most governments, yet still pretends to be above the game. Fitting venue. Because if there's one thing you and I have in common, Albus, it's that we both know what happens when the world stops listening.
Perhaps. Though I suspect our conclusions about what should be done in such moments diverge widely. Still, I'm not here to rewrite your story, Eric, only to understand it. And maybe, if the space allows, offer mine in return. Words, after all, are the only magic we've yet to fully master.
Understanding is overrated. Men like you always think empathy is a solution. You believe if we just listen long enough, people will change. But I've listened, through silence, through gunfire, through the sobs of mothers burying their children in mass graves. And the one thing I've learned is that understanding doesn't stop bullets. Power does. You held it, Dumbledore, and too often you did nothing. I've buried too many friends waiting for another kind-hearted magician to act.
I acted, Eric, more times than I can count. But the act of wielding power is not the same as mastering it. I've seen firsthand how good intentions curdle into tyranny. I've watched ambition disguised as protection fracture lives. And I chose silence at times because I feared what might rise if I spoke too loudly. I do not deny my failures, but I will not apologize for choosing control over conquest.
That's the myth, isn't it? That silence is noble. That doing nothing is safer than risking too much. It's not. It's complicity. While you calculated the moral weight of every spell, people like me were being hunted like animals. You waited for the world to evolve on its own. I realized it never would unless someone forced it to. You call that tyranny. I call it reality. Because history doesn't change unless someone breaks it.
And break it you have, again and again. But tell me, Eric, what rises from the rubble you leave behind? You speak of revolution, but what I see is erosion, of trust, of compassion, of the very soul you claim to be fighting for. You say you act to protect your people, yet how many of them have been caught in the fire you set? You justify the collateral with ideology. I see only wounded children walking in the ashes of a dream that never got the chance to grow.
Collateral is the tax of freedom. You speak of wounded children. I speak of murdered families, burned homes, registration camps masked as protection. I didn't start this war. Humanity did, the moment they realized we were different. You still believe they'll one day welcome mutants with open arms. I stopped believing in fairy tales when I saw children herded into gas chambers. You call my path bloody, I call it honest. And history will judge which of us truly abandoned our people.
Eric, I do not deny your pain, nor will I insult you by pretending the world has not been vicious. But if every scar demands a sword in return, then peace becomes a myth no generation ever reaches. I believe in patience not because I trust humanity's heart, but because I have watched what happens when power becomes a substitute for principle. You burn bridges before anyone can cross them. I build them, even knowing some will collapse.
You built bridges to nowhere. Institutions, councils, classrooms, places where people could talk safely while others died in alleys for being born different. You believed in conversation while our enemies believed in extermination. Every time you held back your hand, a mutant was buried nameless. You fear becoming the tyrant, I fear becoming the victim. And fear, Dumbledore, is not just a compass, it's fuel.
Your war teaches the world to hate you more. You push them to see mutants as threats because that's all you show them. I've taught hundreds, Eric. Children who didn't know what hate was until someone told them they were born with enemies. I've seen hate taught and unlearned. You arm your students with vengeance. I armed mine with wisdom. Only one of us gave them a chance to be something more than a soldier.
What you call vengeance, I call memory. I carry the names of every mutant, silenced by a world too proud to admit its fear. You train children to hope. I train them to survive. Because hope, Albus, doesn't catch bullets. It doesn't erase laws passed in fear. You think the mind is where the war is won. I know it starts with the body. When it's targeted, shamed, broken. You want to teach restraint. I want to teach them to never kneel again.
The power to act doesn't always mean the right to do so. You empower the oppressed, but deny them the burden that comes with power. I've seen bright young minds twisted because they never learned what it means to hold back. There is strength in restraint, Eric, even in a world that mocks it, especially in one that fears it.
You speak of strength in restraint, as if that restraint didn't cost lives. You act like holding back is nobility, but I've watched too many die while good men held their tongues and polished their ethics. The world doesn't reward self-control. It punishes it. The weak get swallowed and the moderate get ignored. Your way may look peaceful, but it's built on delay. While you wait for the world to understand us, I make sure it fears crossing us again. One of us ensures the next child doesn't disappear in the night. And it isn't the one lighting candles in a tower.
And how many children vanish in your name, Eric? How many young minds are taught that fear is a better shield than love? You believe in justice, yet you deliver it blindfolded, indifferent to the hearts crushed along the way. I have made errors, terrible ones, but each taught me that the temptation of righteous fury is often the first step toward becoming the very thing we claim to fight. You burn everything that does not conform to your pain and then call the ash progress. But real progress, real painful progress, requires more than vengeance. It requires vision unmarred by rage.
Vision without pain is fantasy, Albus. You mistake my fire for blindness, but I've never seen more clearly. Every prison camp, every mark etched onto mutant flesh, carved my path with precision. You've read about oppression. I was born in it, molded by it. And that history is not a burden I carry. It's the weapon I wield. You want vision? I've got it in numbers. In every mutant who never saw adulthood. I don't need perfect clarity. I need resolve. And in that, I am absolute.
When we believe we cannot be wrong, we stop listening. When we carry our suffering like gospel, we begin to preach pain as wisdom. You carry a heavy past, Eric. No one can deny that. But the dead you speak for never asked to be used this way. They cry for peace, for dignity, not more war waged in their name. I do not pity you. I fear the simplicity with which you justify blood, and I wonder how long it will be before even the survivors can no longer recognize what you fight for.
They recognize it when the bullets stop, when the camps close, when the doctors stop experimenting on children. Peace is a luxury for the untouched, for those like you who've watched horror from behind windows of influence. You admire the cost of war without ever paying it. I've buried friends who died for your patience. I've held corpses that whispered my name because I hesitated too long trying to be civilized. You think my rage is dangerous. Good. That means someone's finally listening. The alternative is more gravestones. And I'm done being polite about genocide.
And I'm done watching pain be used as currency to excuse cruelty. You demand the world change, but you've made no space in yourself to imagine what that world looks like beyond domination. You don't lead, Eric. You react. Every blow you land is aimed not at the enemy, but at the shadows that never leave you. I know those shadows. I've caused some myself, but I chose to walk with mine, not unleash them. The cost of restraint is real, but the cost of letting the wound guide the blade? That's history's favorite tragedy.
You see tragedy. I see inevitability. I'm not waiting for the world to evolve. I'm dragging it, kicking and screaming, into a future where mutants write the laws, instead of being buried under them. You say I've left no space for peace, but peace has never left room for us. It's always been conditional, on our silence, our obedience, our extinction. I don't want to coexist in a system that despises us. I want to replace it. And yes, I want them to fear what happens when they don't.
Fear may open doors, but it never keeps them open. You'll build your mutant paradise on foundations cracked by terror, and someday those beneath you will tear it down just as violently as you rose. I've taught children who feared their own power more than any enemy. I gave them time, safety, and yes, even restraint, so they could learn to choose, not react. You say you're dragging the world forward. I say you're dragging your trauma with you and calling it progress. But progress must transcend pain, or else it's just another war painted a different color.
You speak like time is endless, like we have the luxury to wait for hearts to soften. I've seen kindness die on courtroom floors, seen promises dissolve when the cameras turn off. The world forgets. It always forgets. You gamble on its memory. I carve reminders into its bones, because symbols rot, monuments fade. But fear stays. It doesn't have to be pretty. It has to work.
You build for survival. I build for flourishing. We may both lose in the end, but I would rather plant a fragile flower and watch it bloom briefly than salt the soil so nothing ever grows again. My faith is flawed, yes, but it allows beauty to exist, even if only for a moment. You've made yourself immune to that kind of beauty, Eric, and that, I believe, is the deepest wound of all.
Maybe it is, but I sleep without illusions. I don't wake hoping the world sees my side. I make it see, and maybe I'll die hated. Maybe my name will be dragged through history like a warning sign. But if one mutant child walks to school without being stoned, if one mother doesn't have to bury her son, it's worth it. I've seen too many fathers cry into their hands while men like you debate policy. I chose the battlefield over the classroom because I never trusted anyone else to protect us.
I do not believe peace is passive. I know it requires sacrifice. But sacrifice without compassion is conquest. I never trusted the world to protect them either, Eric. That's why I built places where they could learn to protect themselves without becoming what the world feared. You chose to be feared. I chose to believe in something more difficult. That pain can be alchemized into purpose, not just retaliation.
Purpose is a luxury for the safe, Albus. I was forged in fire, in hunger, in hatred, and maybe that twisted the man I became. But at least I refuse to pretend I'm anything else. You'll keep sending letters to lawmakers while I tear the doors off their chambers. Because your words will be forgotten. My actions won't. And if the price of our future is being remembered as a villain, then so be it. I've lived too long in graves to care how the eulogies sound.
Then let my legacy be silence if it must. I'd rather vanish from memory than pass down a future built on fear. If we teach the next generation to lead with pain, they will never know peace. They'll just inherit sharper weapons. I chose to believe in gentler revolutions, in fragile students holding power like glass, carefully, reverently. You forged soldiers. I tried to forge stewards. Time will decide which the world needed more. But when it does, I pray it doesn't have to choose at all.